A race that has changed history forever. Two groups faced off to reach the North Pole first, fighting the bitter cold, starvation, and even lying to be recognized by the world. Robert E. Peary and Frederick A. Cook, once working together, ended up fighting each other to reach a vast land of ice where no man has gone before. The end of the Earth, the North Pole. During the 1800s, there was rapid growth in the US economy. Population grew, territory grew, and there was the construction of roads, rails, and canals that dramatically improved national mobility. Because of the growth taking place during the 19th century, many places around the globe were being discovered, but two plots of land that remained untouched by men were the North and South Poles. This man will play a big role in the race to the North Pole. Robert E. Peary, son of Charles Nutter Peary and Mary Webster Willie Peary, was born on May 6, 1865 in Cresson, Pennsylvania. Peary had often dreamed as a child about the day when he would be the first man to set foot on the North Pole. In 1881, Peary learned of an opening in the United States Navy for civil engineers and quickly took it. Over the years, Peary rose in rank and in status, but even while working for the Navy, he never lost track of his goal to reach the North Pole. While taking a leave from his job, Peary crossed the Greenland ice pack. Through this, he realized how much he really loved the North Pole, and it also gave him much needed experience. He learned that traveling solo was not only terribly lonesome, but also potentially deadly. By learning about the dangers of riding solo, Peary looked for men capable of helping on his expedition. By placing an advertisement on the New York Herald, he ended up meeting a man who would play a big role in the race to the North Pole, Frederick A. Cook. Frederick Albert Cook, born on June 10, 1865 in Hortonville, New York, the fifth of 6 children born to Theodore and Magdalena Koch, their last names later being changed to Cook. Frederick Cook was an extremely bright man entering the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia University, later transferring to New York University. He supported himself with a milk delivery business, and even with the grueling schedule of a medical student, he married Libby Forbes in 1889. They were expecting their first child, but tragically, due to complications of the pregnancy, his baby was born dead and his wife died a week later. Saddened by the turn of events, Cook spent his days reading about Arctic adventures. One morning, there appeared in the New York Herald the news announcement that Lieutenant Peary was organizing an expedition to explore the unknown northern limits of Greenland. Cook wrote in his diary saying, "I promptly wrote Peary offering my services." They met for the first time in Philadelphia in the spring of 1891. Both men liked what they saw, and Cook was promptly appointed as the surgeon of the polar expedition. In 1891, Peary led an expedition to determine if Greenland was an island or was a peninsula of the North Pole. Members of this expedition include Peary's aide, Matthew Henson, Dr. Frederick A. Cook, who served as the group surgeon, and Peary's wife, Josephine, who was the dietitian even though she had no previous experience. The news reports started criticizing Peary for his decision to bring along his wife, while also praising Josephine for her bravery and courage. Peary later on wrote about the kinds of people he had on his expedition. "I limited my own party to the number of men absolutely required for the work I proposed to do. They were all young, and in addition to possessing first-class physique and perfect health, were men of education and attainments. I believe this to be the type of man best fitted to endure the ordeal of the Arctic winter and to effectively execute a 2 or 3 months dash on sledges, where intelligent willpower, youthful elasticity, and enthusiasm rise superior to the solid endurance of muscles hardened by years of work." On June 6, 1891, the party left Brooklyn, New York in the seal hunting ship SS Kite. In July, as Kite was ramming through sheets of surface ice, the ship's iron tiller suddenly spun around and broke Peary's lower leg. Both bones snapped between the knee and ankle. Cook quickly set the leg in splints, and later Peary would praise him as a helpful and tireless worker who was patient and cool under pressure. Josephine recorded in her journal that within 3 months, Peary had discarded his crutches and had begun running foot races with Cook to build up his leg. Peary's leg was fully mended in February 1892. On May 3, 1892, Peary and his group finally set out on the intended trek. Once reaching Naval Cliff, Peary found the 3,300-foot-high view to be revealing. He saw Independence Fjord and concluded that Greenland was an island. Peary and his men trekked back to Red Cliff and got there on August 6, having traveled a total of 1,250 miles. Peary returned back to America, where Cook asked for Peary's permission to publish his own studies of the Inuit. Peary refused, wanting to keep the fame for himself, and because of this, Cook promptly resigned. Peary's 1905-1906 expedition was supported by a $50,000 gift by George Crocker, the youngest son of the banker Charles Crocker. Peary used the new money to build the SS Roosevelt, which was designed like Fridtjof Nansen's Fram, with a rounded hull, steam engine, and auxiliary sails. The expedition left on July 16, 1905, and set up winter quarters at Cape Sheridan on Ellesmere Island. When stopping for supplies, Peary wrote, "The Roosevelt now had on board of her a crew of 20, some 40 Inuit, and about 200 dogs. She also carried, in addition to the supplies and equipment for the party, about 450 tons of coal and several tons of walrus meat." When they finally set out, there were 6 crewmen and 21 Inuit men that were broken into 5 supporting parties. Matthew Henson led the way as sledge teams forged a trail through the maze of water and ice. Many of the provision had been lost attempting to cross a lead, with few supplies, open water, and heavy weather slowing their progress down. On April 21st, they reached around 200 miles away from the pole, the farthest north anyone had reached up until that time. But the ice was breaking up around them, forcing Peary and his crew to head back. Meanwhile, in September 1906, Cook claimed to be the first man to have reached the summit of Mount Denali. There were private doubts of his claim, but it was until 1909 by Peary supporters that the event was publicly accused. Cook took a photo for proof of him reaching the summit of Denali, but later it was found to have been taken on a tiny peak 19 miles away. This spot is now known as Fake Peak. This incident has hurt Cook's reputation and leads many to believe Cook also later lied about reaching the North Pole. Peary left New York City on July 6, 1908 aboard the SS Roosevelt for his final expedition to the North Pole. Once reaching the Arctic, the sledging teams averaged around 12 miles a day. On March 31, 1909, Peary reached a record farthest north of 133 miles shy from the pole. From here, he continued with 5 assistants, Henson, Uta, Agignawa, Siglu, and Ukria. On April 6, 1909, Robert E. Peary allegedly planted the flag on the North Pole. After many attempts, Peary had finally reached his lifelong goal, reaching the North Pole. But Peary and his men's success was short-lived. Upon reaching back to the United States, they heard the chilling news of Cook emerging from the Arctic 5 days ago, claiming he had reached the North Pole first. March 18, 1908. While Robert E. Peary was still in New York, Cook had set out from the tip of Axel Heiberg Island. There were only 2 Inuit hunters with him, allegedly taking him 34 days, the 3 of them finally reaching the North Pole on April 21, 1908. When Cook arrived in Copenhagen, he was received as a hero. During a banquet held in his honor, he learned of Peary's claim of reaching the North Pole as well. Cook initially congratulated Peary for his achievement. He said, "There is enough honor on it for both of us. 2 records are better than 1. Peary did not share any of the same feelings. Him and his supporters launched a campaign to discredit Cook. Both men had extremely controversial arguments, Cook not providing enough evidence, while Peary, when calculated, seemed to be going impossibly fast on the dog sleds when chasing down the North Pole. But, after the fight against Peary, Cook's reputation never recovered. His North Pole claim was not as widely accepted as Peary's for most of the 20th century. The truth will most likely never be revealed, and both men's accomplishments stand on the edge. But throughout their lives, they have shown bravery and courage, attempting and maybe even succeeding in reaching the North Pole. Peary and Cook have paved the way for men and women in the future to explore the icy domain called the Arctic.